Don't step foot in these pubs, not until you've heard the truth behind their doors. We've all been there. You're out with friends, it's Friday night, and you're just looking for a decent pint, a good vibe, and somewhere to hang out. You think you know exactly where to go. But what if I told you there's a dark side to the UK pub scene that you might be missing? And no, it's not just the overpriced cocktails or the strange smells in the men's room. Some of your favourite pubs could be hiding serious issues that you really need to know about before you set foot in the door. Whether it's hygiene failures, dodgy food handling, or worse, the risk of losing some of your favourite local spots entirely, things aren't as rosy as they used to be. You might think your regular pub is just fine, but what happens when things go downhill faster than the price of a pint? Well, you're about to find out. In this video, we'll dive into 8 pubs you definitely want to think twice about before you walk through the door again. And as we count down, we'll show you some hidden dangers that are affecting pubs all over the country. Because let's face it, the stakes are higher than a night out at the local. But before we get into it, stick around, because number 1 on this list is a pub that will make you rethink everything you know about drinking out in the UK. Number 8, the Barton's Arms, Birmingham. Now, we're starting off with a bit of a shocker. The Barton's Arms, a Grade 2 listed pub in Birmingham, once known for its historic charm and hearty meals, has had some serious troubles in recent years. This wasn't your run-of-the-mill boozer. This was a historic landmark. But lately, things have taken a turn. You'd think a pub with a history dating back to the 1800s should be solid as a rock, right? Well, it turns out even the oldest institutions are susceptible to modern pressures. The Barton's Arms faced repeated closures in 2024 and 2025, leaving regulars frustrated and confused. And it's not just about the inconsistent opening hours. There's more happening behind the scenes that's got people scratching their heads. Reports show that this beloved venue is struggling financially, which means it can't keep up with rising operational costs. Hygiene standards in places like these sometimes take a hit when management cuts corners to stay afloat. Imagine walking into your favorite pub for a pint, only to realize that the place is just one step away from closure. How is that for a punch to the gut? While Barton's Arms isn't exactly on the worst list, it's an example of how local pubs are being squeezed by the economic pressures many of us don't think about. With rising energy prices, higher business rates, and increasing costs of labour, many pubs are finding themselves between a rock and a hard place. And in the case of Barton's Arms, it's left locals wondering whether they'll have a place to drink their beer come next year. This, friends, is just a preview of what the future holds for many iconic, long-standing pubs that are struggling to survive in a world of skyrocketing costs. The next time you walk into your pub, consider what's at stake, because the Barton's Arms could be the tip of the iceberg. But don't worry, things are about to get a whole lot more interesting. Number 7, the Crooked House, Himley, Staffordshire. Oh, you know the one. The pub that leans like it's had too many pints itself. The Crooked House, once a quirky gem and tourist attraction, was an absolute UK landmark due to its peculiar tilt. Built in the 18th century and famously leaning due to centuries of mining subsidence, the pub became one of the most visited spots in Staffordshire. It was the stuff of legends until it wasn't. Now, the Crooked House's story isn't exactly what you'd call a fall from grace, but it's definitely a tale of disappearing history. The pub's history was one for the books, but a fire in 2023 led to its demolition in 2025, leaving many of its long-standing patrons utterly shocked. And while the fire caused some immediate concerns, the decision to demolish the building and the controversy surrounding the loss put a spotlight on how pub ownership is changing across the country. Why does this matter? Well, the Crooked House isn't just a story about a fire or a quirky building with a tilt. It's a symbol of how the pub industry is transforming. More and more historic venues are being sold off or repurposed, with landlords and businesses opting to cash in on land value rather than keeping these spaces open as pubs. When this happens, we lose pieces of British history that people have grown to love. For many, it was their go-to pub, but for others, it's a grim reminder of what's at risk. Even worse, some locals felt the pub's demolition was inevitable because of how underfunded the place had become. Without proper investment and renovation, iconic spaces like this are easily lost, and once they're gone for good. You might have never been to the Crooked House, but you've probably been to a similar pub that's been sold, closed down, or replaced. The land where these pubs stood gets sold to higher bidders, often transformed into flats or retail spaces. So next time you sip your pint in an old pub, think about how long it'll last. The key takeaway here: while pubs like Barton's Arms are caught up in the struggle to survive financially, Places like the Crooked House are victims of the larger trend of pubs being sold off for their real estate value. You never know when your local pub could be next on the chopping block, but hold tight, because the best or worst is yet to come. You won't believe what's coming next. Number 6. The Dog and Duck, London. Now, I know what you're thinking. The name itself doesn't sound dangerous. The Dog and Duck? More like a charming, cozy little pub where you go for a pint and a quick laugh. Well, here's the thing. Sometimes charming is exactly what it isn't. For those of you who live in London, the Dog and Duck has had a reputation for its Victorian pub vibes, its quirky decor, and being a great spot for both locals and tourists looking for a classic British drinking experience. But as with many so-called hidden gems, things aren't always as they seem when you take a closer look. You see, this historic pub has actually been haunted by issues for quite a while now. And no, I'm not talking about ghost stories. We're talking about repeated health violations that have been flagged by the public. For example, a few years ago, this beloved pub was handed a below-average hygiene rating. And if you've ever seen a food hygiene rating of 1 or 2, you'll know that it's not exactly a great sign. For a pub that prides itself on being traditional and offering food with that homey touch, that's a bit of a red flag. Sure, they could have improved the situation. After all, you can always scrub a kitchen and clean the floors. But the reputation of some places, especially those with a lot of foot traffic, is hard to repair once it gets tarnished. And here's where it gets even worse. It's not just the food and cleanliness that's problematic. This pub is tucked away on a busy London street, so it attracts not just the casual drinker, but tourists. And sometimes that means a very loud and chaotic experience. If you're hoping for a cozy corner and some peace and quiet with your pint, think again. The Dog and Duck has been known for its overcrowded conditions, with people literally spilling out into the streets on weekends. Sure, that sounds fun, but when you're trying to enjoy a drink in close quarters with strangers who are shouting over each other, it can be more annoying than it's worth. Oh, and the food? Let's just say, if you're expecting a Michelin star experience, forget it. When a pub relies so heavily on crowd-pleasing but subpar meals, you're risking disappointing guests who expect more than reheated leftovers or a rushed kitchen staff. And let's not forget that some patrons have even mentioned the lack of effort in some of the pub's traditional offerings. You know the type. Soggy chips, overcooked meat, and dull, tasteless pies. So the next time you're strolling through the streets of Soho and think, hey, let's stop by the Dog and Duck, think about what you're really getting into. You might get a cold pint, but at the risk of food that could leave you with more than just a stomachache. Number 5. The King's Head, Edinburgh. If you're walking through Edinburgh, it's easy to be lured into a place like the King's Head, a classic pub with big wooden beams, a cozy atmosphere, and what looks like the perfect spot to enjoy a local Scottish whiskey. You might even think, wow, this pub's been here for ages, it must be good, right? Well, my friend, that's where things start to go a little sideways. When you step inside, you might feel like you're in an authentic Scottish pub, with the ambience you've dreamed of. But behind that quaint exterior, the King's Head has faced its share of troubles, and not the kind that make for a cute pub story you tell your mates. Oh no, we're talking about serious operational flaws that have made customers wonder if this historic pub will still be around in the next few years. First off, the food quality leaves much to be desired. While they might boast about serving traditional Scottish fare, the quality of that food has been called out more times than we can count. Ever been to a pub where the food just doesn't hit right? That's the King's Head. Over the last few years, reviews have poured in with complaints about bland, poorly prepared food that simply doesn't match up to what the pub claims to offer. Think of it like a place promising fresh, seasonal seafood that's been sitting in the fridge for far too long. And trust me, seafood that's been overcooked or poorly stored is not what you want to mess with. What's worse is that, in recent reports, there have been instances where poor food handling practices have been observed. Cross-contamination, improper storage of raw ingredients, and unclean cooking surfaces have been reported. Yes, the kind of things you don't want to think about when you're eating that fish and chips. But it's not just about the food. The service is another huge issue. Many customers have shared their frustration with long waits to be served, rude staff, and overall disorganized operations. It's one thing if you're sitting in a busy pub and a little chaos ensues, but when poor service becomes the norm, it's a whole other ball game. And when you have a local establishment like the King's Head that prides itself on history but fails to provide basic customer satisfaction, you can see why it's not sitting comfortably on this list. Now, we're not saying the King's Head is a complete disaster, but if you're expecting a relaxing drink in a historic Edinburgh pub with stellar food and good service, you might be in for a letdown. Sometimes a little bit of history can't save a pub from its operational flaws. So, what have we learned so far? While the Dog and Duck in London is a place that has struggled with hygiene and cleanliness, leaving patrons worried about the safety of their food, the King's Head in Edinburgh isn't doing much better in terms of food quality and service. Both pubs fall short of expectations, offering poor experiences despite their historical charms. If you're craving a great meal, an authentic pub vibe, and top-notch service, you might want to consider looking elsewhere. But hold tight, because the deeper we go into this list, the more surprising and eye-opening the pubs to avoid will get. You'll want to stick around for number 4, because we're just warming up. Number 4, the Albert, Manchester. When it comes to classic British pubs, you expect a certain level of charm, warmth, and ideally, a great pint. The Albert in Manchester has long been considered a staple for those seeking a friendly place to grab a beer and relax. However, if you take a deeper dive, you might want to reconsider before stepping through those old wooden doors. You see, while the Albert may have a lot of history and a traditionally British atmosphere, its recent reputation has become anything but glowing. Let's start with the basics. Service. A pub is only as good as its people, right? And the Albert, well, let's just say the service leaves much to be desired. Customers regularly report being left waiting for ages to be acknowledged, with some even sharing their frustrations over the fact that staff often seem overwhelmed, with several patrons feeling that the service is downright disinterested. If you're in the mood for a casual drink where you feel taken care of, this might not be your spot, but let's not stop there. The quality of food here has taken a dive in recent years, and it's clear from online reviews that the Albert no longer holds up its end of the bargain. Once a place known for hearty, comforting pub food, it's now more often associated with lackluster meals that fail to impress. Customers have complained about overcooked chips, slimy vegetables, and meals that seem like they've been sitting under heat lamps for far too long. For a pub that once prided itself on its food, this decline in quality is a major letdown. And let's talk about cleanliness. We know, nobody wants to picture the condition of the kitchen or behind the scenes at their local pub. But sometimes you just have to face the facts. The Albert has been flagged for cleanliness issues more than once. There have been several complaints about sticky tables, dirty bathrooms, and untidy floors that just don't seem to match the pub image you might expect from a supposedly top-tier Manchester establishment. So, while the Albert might have once been a classic, it's now becoming a cautionary tale of how even the most iconic venues can get lost in the shuffle of poor management, declining food quality, and inattentive service. If you're looking for a welcoming place to unwind after a long day, you may want to keep your distance. But don't go anywhere just yet. Things are about to get even more surprising. Number 3, the Plough, Bristol. Now we're getting into dangerous territory, folks. If you've ever visited the Plough in Bristol, you might have had a good experience, or you might not have. Unfortunately, the Plough has earned a reputation that has left many former fans swearing never to return. Let's talk about the elephant in the room: food poisoning. Yes, you heard that right. Multiple complaints have surfaced in recent years regarding food safety at the Plough, with several patrons reporting symptoms of foodborne illness after dining there. While the pub's history and location are pretty fantastic, nestled in the heart of a lively Bristol neighbourhood with a nice, casual vibe, it's becoming less about where everybody knows your name and more about the risk of what you're eating. Unsanitary food handling, including improper storage of raw ingredients and cross-contamination in the kitchen, have been the subject of numerous customer complaints. People expect fresh, safe food at their local pub, but when you walk out with a stomach bug instead, that trust is hard to rebuild. But even beyond food safety, the Plough has also faced issues with customer service that goes from bad to worse. More than once, visitors have described the staff as rude or disinterested in assisting, and when you're paying for pub grub and a pint, you're probably expecting a friendly, attentive experience. Unfortunately, many patrons report that the lack of warmth from staff really drags down what could have been a good night out. What's more, the pub's interior is showing signs of wear and tear that shouldn't be happening at a place that still commands a regular clientele. Stains on the carpets, broken furniture, and a generally scruffy atmosphere seem to have become the norm. And while some might say it adds to the character, there's nothing charming about a pub that feels like it hasn't been updated since the 90s. The once welcoming atmosphere now feels more like you're walking into a place stuck in time, unable to evolve. It's disappointing to see such a potentially lovely spot in Bristol struggling with its own identity, especially when food safety and hygiene concerns are turning many away. The Plough once had a great reputation, But now, it's more of a cautionary tale about why a once popular pub can fall from grace. So if you've got a craving for something hearty and a good pint in Bristol, maybe keep the plough off your list for now. Number 2, the Old Duke, Bristol. And now for the grand finale. Before we get to the most shocking pub on our list, the Old Duke. Bristol's been home to this traditional pub for years, and let's be clear, the Old Duke is iconic. You've probably heard of it, and you may have even been there on a night out. But behind the jazz music, the old school vibe, and the lively crowds, there's something that's been quietly simmering beneath the surface: serious safety concerns. Let's get into it. Fire safety. A major issue that's come to light recently is the fire safety violations at the Old Duke. It's not the sort of thing you want to read about when you're out enjoying a pint, but it's important. The pub was recently slapped with some serious fines for violating fire safety protocols. Imagine that, a venue with packed crowds regularly and fire exits that are blocked or not up to code. The risk this presents to customers is far too great to ignore, and it's one of the reasons the Old Duke has been called out for poor management. Beyond fire concerns, the pub has also been under scrutiny for the lack of proper food hygiene. Another gut punch for a pub that prides itself on being a hotspot for music lovers and thirsty locals alike. While it's a place that used to be the go-to spot for a good time in Bristol, reviews show a concerning decline in food quality, especially around dirty tables, overcooked meals, and unsanitary conditions in the kitchen. And for a pub that's supposed to be serving comfort food, it's upsetting to think that patrons could be eating subpar meals, or worse, unsafe food. What makes the situation even more alarming is the fact that this place, despite its issues, continues to attract customers, making it harder for the general public to realize just how dangerous the situation could be if it remains unchecked. With fire safety and food quality concerns creeping under the radar, it's a ticking time bomb. So, before you think about grabbing that next pint, consider your safety and rethink your next move. And that's where we stand as we look into the falling fortunes of historic pubs like the Old Duke. Serious risks like food safety violations and fire hazards continue to plague even the most famous names in the industry. It's all fun and games until you realize what's happening behind the scenes. And once you see it, it's hard to unsee. But brace yourselves. Number 1 is about to shock you in a way you won't believe. Stay tuned, because the final entry on this list is the pub that might just change the way you look at the entire UK pub scene forever. Number 1, the Black Bull, Leeds. Now, here we are, the pub you definitely should never walk into again, unless you want to rethink every pub you've ever visited. If you've been following along, you might have already guessed this place was coming. And trust me, it's worse than anything we've covered so far. The Black Bull, located in the heart of Leeds, is infamous, and not in a good way. This historic pub has been a local favourite for years, but in recent times, it has become a danger zone for anyone looking for a safe, enjoyable night out. Let me break it down for you. First off, hygiene. The Black Bull has earned itself a rather unflattering reputation when it comes to food safety. Multiple reports over the years have pointed to severe hygiene issues in both the kitchen and bar areas. We're talking about unclean surfaces, poorly stored ingredients, and even reports of rats in the vicinity. Yes, you heard that right. In 2023, local news outlets reported that customers had seen rats scurrying near the kitchen area. Can you imagine sitting there enjoying your pint, only to look over and see a rat in the corner? That's not the kind of local charm you signed up for. And it gets worse. The food, it's been repeatedly flagged for being downright unsafe. Multiple food poisoning complaints have emerged from patrons who've eaten there in the last year. And we're not just talking about a couple of upset stomachs. We're talking serious cases of foodborne illness. Reports suggest that poor food, handling practices, and lack of proper temperature control led to incidents that were flagged by health inspectors. But the issues don't stop with cleanliness and food safety. The atmosphere at the Black Bull has also been called into question. While it used to be a cozy, vibrant pub with a decent crowd, the vibe now feels off. Regulars report that the pub has turned into a loud, chaotic mess, especially on weekends. With a lack of seating, overcrowding, and drunken arguments, it's far from the welcoming atmosphere you'd expect from a pub with this much history. It's become the place to avoid, not the spot to unwind with friends. Even the staff are starting to get bad reviews. From poor service to rude employees, it's no surprise that patrons are giving this once beloved pub a 1-star rating. To top it all off, the management has been accused of ignoring complaints and failing to address the growing concerns. So, when you combine terrible hygiene, food safety nightmares, and a declining atmosphere, It's no wonder that the Black Bull is number one on our list. It's the pub that could ruin your night and possibly your health. There you have it, the 8 UK pubs you need to seriously think twice about before you ever step foot in them again. From unsanitary conditions and food safety violations to shoddy service and overpriced subpar food, these pubs are hiding more than just questionable pints. If you're not careful, they could be serving up more than you bargained for. And trust me, it's not worth the risk. But here's the thing, you're not powerless in this. You can check the hygiene ratings of every pub and restaurant you visit, thanks to the Food Hygiene Rating Scheme. If you've got concerns, search online, ask the locals, or take a quick look at reviews before you settle in. Don't just take your chances with your health and your evening. So, what do you think? Have you had a bad experience at one of these pubs or somewhere else? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. We'll keep you in the know about the places you should avoid and the ones you definitely shouldn't miss. Stay safe, stay informed, and stay away from the pubs that could make you regret it. See you in the next video.